Hi, everyone. This is Alex Torres with the Building Successful Families program. And today's training is on cultural competency and sensitivity when it comes to children care. A child's care and development should be the top concern of everyone involved in foster care, right? And as a foster parent, as a resource parent, you might need to take unique steps to ensure the child's maximum well-being um, if the child's cultural background is different from your own. And we know that here in Fresno County, majority of the children in care are African American and Hispanic children. This means that cultural competency and sensitivity is a vital part of your role as a resource parent. This helps you understand, respect the child's religion, cultural views, customs, and beliefs. Cultural sensitivity can also give the child a sense of permanency and belonging that will benefit them emotionally, mentally, and in spiritual ways. The importance of cultural sensitivity in your home is very, very crucial. The entire household needs to have a strong degree of cultural competency. This can help prevent any bullying of a child of a different cultural background or accidental insensitivity. It is very important that you provide a home that is compassionate and sensitive when it comes to culture, and that the children feel that. You as a parent have enormous influence on how foster children treat other children. When you as a foster parent are culturally aware, you can teach and model this behavior to your children. This means teaching children about diversity, teaching them about being open-minded and fair towards others. And also children and parents in foster care systems should learn about the harm that can be done to others through stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. So let's go ahead and get started with our training. All right, cultural competence and care. So how would you describe yourself culturally? When you think about culture, what comes up to mind? What do you visualize? What do you feel? I know for me, when I think about culture, I think about the food. I think about my grandma's food and her passion for cooking, and she definitely demonstrates her love through food. I also think about the colors and the attire that is so beautiful when it comes to my culture. So what comes to mind for you? Also, I want you to make sure you have a pen and paper handy and use your pen and paper as moments for reflection as now. What would you like to learn today when it comes to culture? Our goal for you is that you will understand what culture is and that you can recognize its influence on behavior. We also want resource parents to know the differences in cultural beliefs and how standards of behavior can lead to misconceptions about others. Resource parents will learn how to honor the foster child's cultural norms and practices in home while still respecting their own. I know at times this can be challenging. We have our own values and belief systems, and you don't get to choose what values and belief systems the children that you care for come with. But you can be compassionate and understanding and sensitive. Resource parents will know how to model management of culture differences with the foster child through open discussion and celebration of each other's culture. I think this is also a great opportunity to learn about other cultures and open yourself up to understanding and having compassion for others. So, what is culture? Culture includes the shared values, tradition, norms, custom, religion, arts, history, language, and/or institutions of specific groups. of people. In other words, culture is what we live every day and what we display in our daily interactions with others. I know that there's also subcultures within cultures. For example, I'm first generation Mexican American, and my mom and dad are both from Mexico, but they're both from different regions of Mexico. With that being said, food is different. The way they speak Spanish is different. The way that they dress is different. Although it's still Mexico, my dad's more from the southern part of Mexico, so you see more of the indigenous culture, as my mom is more of the northern part of Mexico that, it's not too far from the border. It's more modernized and city life like. So the values and the traditions, even though they're still from Mexico, are a little different when it comes to the regions that both of my parents are from. Also, for me, I remember growing up and feeling conflicted because I was first generation Mexican American. And although my parents didn't live in Mexico anymore, they had strong belief systems about the way of living and what's right or wrong. And we'll be talking about values in a little bit, but it was very conflicting to me because now here I am, I'm growing up in America, which the values and the culture in America are very different from the values, the culture of Mexico. Even though my parents lived here now, a lot of their cultural belief systems were still very, very rooted in how it was to live in Mexico, I guess. And so that caused challenges for me growing up because I didn't know who I was. What do I want? That's not my truth anymore. I don't really believe that, but it's what my household believes in, and here I am, living in America and totally different. So that was a little conflicting for me growing up. So now let's dive into cultural awareness and sensitivity. Cultural awareness means to indicate that a person is conscious of the similarities and differences within, between, and amongst cultures. So that is very important, to be aware of the similarities and the differences so that you can be mindful, right? Cultural sensitivity indicates that a person not only has been in awareness of the nuances of one's old culture as well as those of others, but also that he or she does not assign a negative or positive value to the differences within, between, and amongst cultures, accepts cultural differences non-judgmentally. And this is very important because a lot of us grow up with very strong cultural beliefs and values and can feel scared when other people present their cultural beliefs and values, and we feel like we have to stick up for our beliefs, right? But when you have cultural sensitivity, you are able to acknowledge with compassion the differences and not feel shaken by other people's beliefs or values. You can still stand in your power and own who you are culturally, but you don't have to be insensitive to others. So it's very important that you develop your cultural sensitivity muscle and awareness when it comes to working and dealing with children from diverse backgrounds, right?
Open. Open a door and it opens all the others. Open a mind and see what happens next. No great thing, no beautiful invention was created in a vacuum. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and come together. Embrace faiths, cultures, disabilities, differences. Embrace races, ages, ideologies, personalities, creating a tool or device nobody saw coming. Humanity is plural. not singular. The best way the world works is everybody in, nobody out. So who we're made of is everyone. Differences not just celebrated, but essential. Many more women in charge, equal pay for equal work everywhere. A new generation of Apple, more diverse than the one that came before. Open is not just who we are, but what we believe as a company, because humanity isn't singular, it's plural. The truth is, we don't see things the same. The power is, we don't see things the same.
Wow, that was beautiful. So two things stick out to me from this video. I like this last quote where they said, "The truth is, we don't see things the same. The power is that we don't see things the same." Let that sink in. There's another part of this video that triggered something within me. So I want you to take some time to reflect. Did any emotions come up? And for me, it was that part where it said like more women in charge, because culturally speaking, women in my culture have not really held positions of leadership. Women in my culture, not saying that this is still the truth, but it was very common, might still kind of be common, that women are the ones that stay home, cook and clean and take care of the kids and sacrifice while the men go work and take charge, right? And I say this because I have a funny story. A couple years ago in my second marriage, my husband is like fifth generation, so he's very modernized Latino. And my mom called me once, and my husband was making dinner, and I was, I don't know what I was doing, but my husband was making dinner. And I told him, "Oh, what's everybody doing?" I said, "Yeah, Rob's making dinner." "Well, honey, what do you mean he's making dinner?" Like, "Yeah, he's making dinner, Mom." I'm telling her this in Spanish. And she really took offense to that. Like, how dare my husband cook? That's a woman's role. And so I had a lot of compassion for my mom, and I understand that that's her belief. That's not my belief anymore. And so I can appreciate and understand her differences, but I don't have to abide by them, and I don't have to get offended either. So just thought I shared a funny story of, accepting myself culturally diverse within my own culture. So what is cultural competency? It includes the skills that enable individuals to increase their understanding and appreciation of cultural differences and similarities, which is so important. Not only to see what is different, because that is our power, but also what is alike, because that is our power. As much as we are different, we're also all humans, and there's so much similarities to us and us having this human experience, right? It also allows providers to understand, appreciate, and work with individuals of cultures other than their own, right? And then involves the willingness and ability of a system to value the importance of culture and the delivery of services to all segments of the population. So cultural competency is the use of systems perspective, which values differences and it's responsive to diversity at all levels of an organization. For example, policy, governance, administrative, workforce, provider, and consumer client. Cultural competence is developmental, community focused, and family oriented. In particular, it's the promotion of quality services to underserved racial ethnic groups through the valuing of differences and integration of cultural attitudes, beliefs, and practices into diagnostic and treatment methods and throughout the system to support the delivery of cultural relevant and competent care. It is also the development and continued promotion of skills and practices important in clinical practice, cross-cultural interactions, and systems practices amongst providers and staff to ensure that services are delivered in a culturally competent manner. So now let's move forward and breaking down the different factors of culture. So culture is a system of values, beliefs, attitudes, traditions, and standards that governs the organization of people into social groups and regulates both group and individual behaviors. So within a culture, there's many factors that make up a culture, right? There's the language, there's the style of communication and how we communicate, courtesies, rituals, their roles, customs, relationships, practices, expected behaviors, values, thoughts, and manners of interacting. For example, in a lot of Asian cultures, looking at someone in the eyes can be seen as a sign of disrespect. As in my culture, I remember if my mom was talking to me and I was not looking at her in the eyes, that was a sign of disrespect. So very important to be culturally aware of yourself and other cultures, because what might seem like disrespect to you might not be to other cultures and vice versa, right? So this will definitely save us a lot of emotional distress and frustrations as we become culturally aware. Also expected behaviors and practices. I know something, it might not be as common anymore, but I know that it is something common in the Hispanic culture is, it's kind of frowned upon if you date outside of your race. It's like an unspoken value. It's an unspoken expected behavior. And there is a lot of shift going on in it, but it's still something that, it's frowned upon in a silent way. It's like there's these also unspoken values or rules that families and cultures carry. And a lot of the times you might not even know about them, but through epigenetics, attitudes and belief system have been passed down to you. You might think like, why would I believe this? I didn't grow up in Mexico, or, I'm fifth generation, because those attitudes and belief systems get passed down through epigenetics. Actually, that brings me a good idea. One moment. Let's do YouTube. I'm gonna find a cool video. Is it cool? Oh, here we go. I'll show you guys this one.
They found that when babies grew up, they carried their mama's behavior with them and passed it on to the next generation and the next one, and so on. But could it simply be that this particular group of rats was genetically predisposed to produce caring mothers? Well, to test this, the researchers took newborn babies from low-licking mothers and fostered them with high-licking mothers, and vice versa. It turns out that if the mother is a high licker, the rat baby becomes a high licker too, regardless of whether it's genetically related to her or not. So genes really don't have anything to do with it then? In true scientific fashion, the researchers dove right into the brains of these rats to see what, if anything, was different in the brains of the babies of high-licking versus low-licking mothers. When they looked at genes that possibly play a role in motherly care, they found crucial differences. Newborn rat babies have clusters of molecules called methyl groups attached to these genes. These methyl groups silence the gene, effectively switching it off. The researchers discovered that while the methyl groups in rats from low-licking mothers were still attached, in the rats from high-licking mothers, these methyl groups had disappeared. This was also true for the rats that had been adopted by high-licking rat mothers. The care these rats received from their mothers actually physically altered their genetic expression. Now that's all fine and good for rats, but what about people? Well, the same is true for Lucky Lyle and Troubled Tim, and for you and me. The genes you're born with are the genes you've got. But lifestyle and environmental influences such as nutrition, exercise, smoking, stress, and love greatly affect your biology. These changes can actually be observed at the DNA level. The bright side is that epigenetic changes happen throughout our lives, and our choices can make real differences in how we develop as human beings.
Alrighty. That is a cool video. I really like. All right, let's go back to your PowerPoint. There we go. So one of the things that he did mention was our lifestyle and our environmental influences can shift our epigenetics, hence our attitudes, beliefs, and traditions. I can relate to that. And this is something that I've been trying to tap into a little bit more, is really becoming more familiar with my culture, besides like the norms and the behaviors that we have to, expected behaviors and values. I know that my parents came here and their focus was to work hard to provide a better living for us. And so I feel like I kind of missed out on really knowing and getting to understand my culture as a whole, not just the values and the expected behaviors, but the wholeness of my culture. There's so many beautiful things that I know about it, as far as food is a big part of our culture. And my grandma is one that demonstrates that a lot. She loves cooking, and I love her cooking, and she cooks very authentic Mexican food. But there's a lot of other things that I don't know about my culture, and I wish I knew more. So, yeah. So values. What are values? Values are strongly held beliefs about what life and people should be like, what is good and bad in life, and what is right or wrong. Depending on your culture, your values will be very different. Some cultures value more individualism than the collective, right? A lot of Eastern countries value the collective, family, groups, circles, as in the Western is a little bit more individualistic. What comes up for you when you think about what your values are? Is it respect, love, fairness, connection, growth, hard work, acceptance? And I also want you to think, do your values change? And is it okay for your values to change? All right, now let's move into codes of conduct. These are the rules and standards of rules and standards of conduct, encouraging behaviors that is consistent with the culture's values. How we treat elders, perspective regarding therapy and counseling, medical health practices. I know in my culture, the way that you approach mental health is very different from culture here in America. Usually you seek more of a spiritual guide, or you go to a curandera or curandero, which are like spiritual healers. And I believe that usually if you're having a mental health struggle, there's like an entity that's being possessed. Now, does that make it right or wrong? No, it's just codes of conduct when it comes to healing can be different. I know I had a friend a while back who was from Thailand, and they really have a lot of respect for their elders. They value them so much. In everything and anything, any functions or festivities, the elders always go first in everything. They're the first to eat, they're the first to sit down, everything. that might be different in other cultures. So yeah, how they view and value children also is very different and interesting. Perspectives regarding therapy and counseling. As mentioned, Hispanic cultures, to seek mental health professional or psychiatric help is unlikely. Instead, you are encouraged to talk to your priest, pastor for guidance, or curanderos, healers. Go get a cleanse. A limpia is like go get an energy cleanse. So that's where you see people using like the egg, or you get a reading. A lot of other very interesting ways of healing. In the African American culture, to seek mental health services is not a common practice either. Instead, you are encouraged to speak with the church pastor or sister, brother from the congregation. In Asian culture, many Asians are less likely to pursue psychiatric care and counseling because they consider psychiatric conditions shameful. Somatization, which commonly manifests as dizziness, palpitations, and stomach pain, is much more likely in such a culture environment. So I want you to reflect on yourself, when it comes to your perspective of therapy and counseling. What has influenced your perspective of therapy and counseling? I know I first sought therapy and counseling after about a year after my sister passed away. It took me about a whole year to really process her death. And I had a breakdown one day and I was like, I need help. And I remember going to my parents and telling them, I think we would all benefit from seeing a counselor. And I remember that conversation still. My dad got up and was like, we're not crazy. We're not crazy. And they took it as an offense, disrespectful for me to encourage and, tell them that, they might benefit from going to therapy. So I had to learn to find boundaries, and I sought therapy, and it's been very helpful, but I had to really break away from my cultural norms and start creating my own norms when it came to taking care of myself. Cultural and family dynamics. And there's different ways of viewing culture and the structure of family, such as I mentioned, individuality versus interdependence, collectivism, nuclear versus extended family models, multi-generational households, role flexibility and kinship, family dynamics, and acculturation. So let's go back to individuality versus interdependence. Individuality values self-reliance, decision-making based on individual needs, and the right to a private life. Interdependence, absolute loyalty to one, immediate and extended family tribe. Decisions-making processes emphasizes the need of a family group first, and the concept of a private life may not exist. Take it, for example, with Native American families, a lot of the elders get involved with making decisions in regards to other tribe members and kids. And it is common for the tribe as a whole to raise your children. Nuclear versus extended family roles is a compromise of parents and their children, parents making major life decisions for children under the age of 18. Extended family model, EFM, individuals rely heavily on an extended network of reciprocal relationships with parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, and many others. Collectivism, cultures who use EFM are American Indian, Asian, Hispanic, African, and Middle Eastern. That is very true. When I was struggling as an adolescent, as a young teen, my entire family came in and helped out. I wasn't actually literally part of like the foster care system, but in a funny way, I kind of was within my family. Since the age of 13, I bounced around from my uncles and aunts and grandma and mom. And so kind of everybody came as a collective to help raise me. Multi-generational households. It is very common for collectivism cultures to establish multi-generational households. In most MGH, there are at least 3 generations living together: parents, children, grandparents. Asian traditional families, the oldest male in the family who brings his bride to live with his parents. The daughter-in-law usually plays a submissive role to her mother-in-law who rules the roost. Hispanic families, grandparents live with their children and grandchildren. Mothers often gain a great deal of support from the grandmothers in these type of domestic matters, but this varies depending on the dynamics uniquely to the family. Role flexibility and kinship. American Indian families, not uncommon for Native American grandparents to raise great-grandchildren, great-grandchildren, while the parents leave the reservation to find work. African American families, the mother sometimes plays the role of the father and thus functions as the head of the household. We know there's other contributing factors to that. A lot of children in the African American community are growing up without a father, and there's a lot of controversy and movement around that because it does impact children. Family dynamics and acculturation, integrational conflicts may happen when a migrated family is aligned with the culture of their country of origin, while their offsprings are likely to adapt to the dominant culture more rapidly. Also, may feel loss of status due to language barriers, where parents are dependent on their children to translate for them in educational and healthcare settings. I know that happened to me a lot. My mom would always have me translate for her because she did not speak English. And so at a very young age, I had to help her out. So what are your family dynamics like? Do any of these hit it home? Maybe it's a few. Maybe there's a different dynamics. Maybe there's 2, 3, or 4, right? So what other codes of conduct can you think of amongst different cultures? And this is a time for you to reflect and write whatever comes up to you. So some examples are gender norms, dating standards, and family roles. As I mentioned earlier, a code of conduct that was a silent one was you don't date outside of your race. Also gender roles, the men work and the women cook and clean and just take care of the kids. So that's also another code of conduct. So what are some codes of conducts that are part of your culture? And how do they influence the way that you view the world? How are they similar or different from other cultures? Some barriers to achieving cultural competency can be language, nonverbal communication, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact may have different meanings and certain values. It's so funny because I try not to do it a lot when I'm speaking English, but when I'm speaking Spanish, my hands and my body movement are super animated. And when I get together with my family, especially the women, we are very animated women. And if you don't know Spanish, you would think that we were arguing and fighting with one another, but we are actually just communicating. I know the style of communication is very, very similar to Italians, who are very animated in their style of communicating verbally and non-verbally. So also stereotyping assignments of characteristics or beliefs about another culture based on prejudice or limited exposure. Okay, racism obviously is one, and that is very harmful. And ethnocentrism, belief that one's ethnicity provides a true or correct view of the world. So these are different barriers to achieving cultural competency. And I want to challenge you to look within and see, where do I carry some of these biases and beliefs? Where do I feel that I might be stereotyping or experiencing racism or ethnocentrism? Misunderstanding and communication. So there's a few. High context. Communication tends to be indirect, harmoniously structured, and understated. In conversation, people are expected to speak one after another in orderly, linear fashion. Disagreements are personally threatening. It is important to solve conflict immediately or avoid it completely in order to work to continue. Physical space is considered more communal. Standing very close to others is a common practice. Verbal messages are indirect. Speakers often talk around a point instead of directly to it and use embellishments to convey meaning. Accuracy is valued. How well something is learned is important. Some countries consider high context include Japan, Greece, and various Arab nations. Low context is communication tends to be linear, dramatic, precise, and open. Because words are so highly valued, they are used almost constantly. Disagreements are depersonalized. Conflicts do not have to be resolved immediately for work to continue. When solutions are found, they tend to be rationally based. Privacy and personal space are very high valued, and physical space is considered privately owned. Verbal messages are explicit and direct. Words are valued above their context. Speed is valued. How efficiently something is done is important. Some countries considered low context include the US, Germany, and various Scandinavian countries. So European. Eye contact, made or not, who makes it and how long. Asian cultures avoid eye contact as this is seen as disrespectful. Latin and Northern American value eye contact, and it's important to convey equality. And in Ghana, if a young child looks an adult in the eye, it is considered an act of defiance. Interesting. Touch. A great number of cultures' expressions are achieved through touch. In America, for example, using a firm handshake is considered appropriate to greet a stranger or another business professional. In France, however, it is common to kiss someone you greet on both cheeks. Touching children on their head is fine in North America, yet in Asia, this is considered highly inappropriate, as the head is considered a sacred part of the body. In the Middle East, the left hand is customarily used to handle bodily hygiene. Therefore, using that hand to accept a gift or shake hands is considered extremely rude. There are also a wide range of cultural viewpoints on the appropriate rules regarding physical contact between both similar and opposite genders. Gestures. Gestures can convey widely different meanings. Individuals in the US use the OK sign to convey that something is acceptable. In Japan, however, the same hand symbol means money. Argentinians, Belgians, the French, and the Portuguese all use the symbol to mean zero or nothing. Still, other countries in Eastern Europe consider that same sign as an offensive swear. Physical space. Countries that are densely populated generally have much less need for personal space than those that are not. For example, the Japanese are less likely to react strongly to an accidental touch by a stranger than Americans. Less personal space is also needed in areas such as Latin America and in the context of one-on-one conversations in the Middle East. And I think there's certain places here in the US as well where there's not a lot of need for personal space. Here in California, especially in the Central Valley, I'm used to my personal space and I love it. And about 7 years ago, I went to New York for the first time. Excuse me. And I was walking in Times Square. If you haven't been to New York, what you've seen to me is pretty accurate as far as like a lot of people. It's very, very populated. And I was walking and people just kept bumping into me and wouldn't even apologize. And it frustrated me, and I was so frustrated. And I started to cry, and this lady seen me. She was like, honey, where are you from? And I told her from California. She was originally from California as well. And she told me, here, don't take it personal, but you just got to know what you want, keep it moving. Like, if you stop to read or do something, you're most likely going to get bumped and not get an excuse me, because that's just the way it is. So I learned something new. We are in, okay, facial expressions. Oh, yes. Winking is a facial expression particularly varied in meaning. In Latin America, for example, the gesture is often considered a romantic or sexual invitation. The Yoruba people in Nigeria wink at their children if they want them to leave the room, and the Chinese consider the gesture rude. Interesting. Posture. Posture can convey power structures, attitudes, and levels of civility. Slouching in Taiwan is considered disrespectful, while other parts of the world may not think much of it one way or another. In America, standing with hands on the hips may suggest power or pride, but in Argentina, it may suggest anger or a challenge. Many cultures also frown upon showing the bottom of the shoe, something that is considered dirty. Therefore, sitting with the foot resting on the opposite knee is strongly discouraged in places such as many Arab countries. Paralanguage refers to factors of speech such as an accent, pitch, range, volume, or articulation. In Britain, for example, people use volume to convey anger, while in India, they use it to command attention. Japanese women make a point of raising the pitch of their voices to differentiate themselves from men. In America, voice pitch between genders remain comparably the same. The use of an attitude towards silence can also be considered a type of paralanguage. The Greeks used silence as a way to refuse things, while Egyptians use it to consent. Some cultures, such as those in Asia, are generally more comfortable with long bouts of silence than others. Also using nonverbal cues. Although there are many differences in our backgrounds, language, and norms, there are still 6 universal nonverbal cues across cultures: anger, joy, surprise, disgust, sadness, and fear. So, what are some nonverbal cues that are common in your culture? I want you to take a few moments to reflect on this. All right, so let's continue. All right, so let's keep it going. Okay, so now let's look at misunderstanding versus judging. What's the difference? We see something that conflicts with our codes of conduct, but we ask about the behavior and learn about the values reflected by the unfamiliar code of conduct. That's misunderstanding. Judging is we see the behavior. We see the behavior reflecting an unfamiliar code of conduct. We ask about the behavior, but we answer the questions ourselves. Now let's look at errors in assessing culture. There's ethnocentrism, stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination. And I want to remind you guys, this is not for, if you find yourself in any of these steps, it's not for you to feel bad or blame yourself. We're all learning and growing. And the fact that you're here educating yourself is key to bringing awareness. Ethnocentrism is judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture. Thinking another culture is strange because they dress differently than you do. or they eat different foods, or they talk differently. Stereotyping is when you judge a group of people who are different from you based on your own opinions, encounters, and other opinions, and or others' opinions, encounters. For example, all children don't enjoy healthy food. Or for a while, I thought that all men, Mexican men, were abusive because my first marriage, my husband was abusive. And for a long time, I refused to date Hispanic men because I just stereotyped based on one experience, right? And then discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. For example, calling children insulting names because of their color or their age or because of some physical or mental disability. Food for thought. Some children in care may come into the home with pre-existing ideas about race, gender, identity, religion. We cannot blame children for these pre-existing beliefs, but what strategies would you use to handle these explanations? What do you have right now in your toolbox to help you navigate through these differences with children in your care that come from different backgrounds, different beliefs, and maybe gender identity? Identity is a quality, beliefs, personality, looks, and or expressions that make a person, self-identity or group, social group, category or group. So what is identity? What makes you you? We've mentioned a lot of factors as far as culture. There's other things to consider. The center of the wheel, as you can see, represents internal dimensions that are usually most permanent or visible. The outside of the wheel represents dimensions that are acquired and change over the course of lifetime. The combination of all these dimensions influence our values, behaviors, experiences, and expectations, and make us all unique as individuals. And I do believe that as you grow and evolve and you change, so will your belief systems, the way that you view the world, and the way that you behave. Political beliefs are a way of influencing who you are in your identity. We know that that's a big thing right now in America, and it's not something that's people can't openly say their political views without getting a very harsh response right now. So that's a different place to be for a lot of people. Work experience, your education, your religion, your income, all these factors make up your identity. Identity gives us a sense of stability in the world and within ourselves, a sense of belonging, self-worth, individuality. So, what do you feel about your identity, and when did you develop your identity, and has your identity changed? And this is important for you to be able to answer for yourself, because it'll give you a more understanding when it comes to the children in your care. I know that I struggled a lot with my identity growing up as first generation Mexican American, because I didn't know, there's a saying in Spanish, no soy de aquí ni soy de allá, I'm not from here or there. And so it was challenging to find myself and my identity when at home my cultural beliefs that I grew up with were not aligning with a Mexican American woman that I was becoming, right? So it was very hard. Also how we think and we feel, how we process. For example, I learned that crying was kind of a sign of weakness in our culture. You just got to keep it moving, and you don't have time to cry and be vulnerable and be sad. You just got to keep it moving. So how I thought and how I felt was influenced a lot by my culture. Crying was a sign of weakness. You can't cry. You just got to keep on working hard and you'll get over it, And also how we behave and how others view us is a big component in our identity and our culture. I know my parents struggled when I was a teen mom. It was like, what are people going to think? There's like this scarlet letter on me now of what's going on in that family, that she's pregnant so young. And then other differences, there's differences of religion, also obviously where we grow up, urban, suburban, rural, people can be different in your environment, and the atmosphere that you grew up in also is a role that influences your identity. Different geographical regions, different languages, different sexual orientations, gender identity, different abilities. You know, as I said, I grew up in a small agricultural town where I would say 99.9% of everybody was Hispanic. There was no African American people, that's for sure. And I remember when I moved out of there to a bigger city where it was more diverse, my son started second grade and he came home and he was so excited. It was 2008 that summer. So President Obama had been our president for a couple months already. And, you know, it's a big deal, our first African-American president, and they were learning about him in school. And so my son comes home that year of second grade and he was so excited. He's like, I have a friend and he looks like Obama. And, you know, that was his way of saying, I have an African-American friend. Like he was not used to that. So, you know, the areas that we grow up in can influence the way that we view others or we don't view others, or the newness of things and people, right? Also religion. We have people with diverse backgrounds when it comes to spirituality. You have Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and Taoism and Confucianism, Buddhism, Shinto, Sikhism. There's so many different. How do you stay in your power and grounded when children come from diverse backgrounds? Do you make an effort to become curious about their belief systems? Do you hold space for them to be able to practice their belief systems? How does it make you feel? You know, these are good questions and things to start exploring when it comes to children and their beliefs. And like I mentioned, you know, the community where we grow up, you know, behaviors and attitudes might be a little bit more different depending on where you grow up. I went to New York in 2012, and that was a culture shock for me because everybody was what I called rude. You know, you're in a city that's very populated compared to rural California. And so space over there, personal space is like non-existing pretty much. I was walking down in Times Square and everybody was bumping into me and nobody was stopping to say, excuse me or sorry. And I took offense. I was so frustrated and I started to cry. And then this lady came and saw me and was like, what's wrong? And I told her what was going on. She's like, you know what, honey, this is how New York is. Don't take it personal. Just know what you want and keep it moving because it's just how it is here. And so I thought they were rude, but people are just, they got places to be and were focused. That doesn't mean that they were rude, but I took that as offense. So also be mindful of where the children in your care grew up. You know, communities influence our behaviors and our identity and what we believe in. Here we see, you know, geographic regions. I don't know how often you get children from out of California, but if you do, I would, you know, explore and become curious about the mannerisms and the culture in different parts of the U.S. Texas is really friendly. I've been to Texas and people are so nice and so friendly and so chatty and so respectful. New York is a whole different ballgame. So, but that doesn't make them bad people. It's just, it's the way that it is, right? So become curious. And also explore nationalities. You know, you have children here from different nationalities, mostly Hispanic, Mexican American, Latin, and you have a lot of Vietnamese, Laos. There is a lot of diversity here in our area, so I would start becoming aware of that and exploring that and becoming curious. And also language, you know, become familiar of the diverse languages that are in our area. I'm not saying go learn Spanish or Laos, but become familiar with what languages are common in our area. In Fresno County, Spanish, Hmong, Laotian, Tagalog, and Chinese are amongst the most popular diverse languages in our area. And then what's the difference? I'm not going to dive in fully into this topic because we do host the RISE training with Sina on the LGBTQ population here in our area. And she dives into more details and in-depth information about children in care that identify with a different gender or are bisexual or consider themselves lesbian, homosexual. These are words to become familiar with and start becoming more curious, as we do have children in care that are considered LGBTQ, and it's vital and important that you know how to show compassion and cultural sensitivity with these children. And again, Sina will be going over this during our RISE training. Our next one is October. But here you can see the genderbread person. What is genderqueer? Gender identity is how you in your head think about yourself. It's the chemistry that composes you, such as your hormone levels and how you interpret what that means. Gender expression is how you demonstrate your gender based on tradition, gender roles, through the ways that you act, dress, behave, and interact. And then we have biological sex refers to the objectively measured organs, hormones, and chromosomes. For example, female is vagina, ovaries, men is testes and penis. And then we have sexual orientation is who you are physically, spiritually, and emotionally attracted to based on their sex, gender in relation to your own.
I became a youth of foster care because at the age of 12, that's when I found it courageous of me to be able to tell my mother that I was gay, but then that wasn't the correct word. Transgender would have been the right word, but that time, never even heard of the word. So I came out to my mother, happy and hoping that she would be happy for me as well for knowing something early on, and she wasn't. I went to 5 different behavioral facilities because it was a mental problem that I was having, which they diagnosed me with bipolar, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, all for wanting to dress as a woman because that's the way I felt inside. And then my very last visit at one of the behavioral facilities, she left me there for 82 days until they were able to find a foster parent for me. When they found my foster parent and I was able to be interviewed, I really didn't care as long as I was out of that place and I knew I was able to find a new family who would eventually have to love me since my own family didn't.
I started out in foster care living with my aunt, and all my brothers and sisters was there, and everything was great. Then it came to a point wherein I couldn't stay with mine anymore, and I went to a regular foster home, and it was the worst experience ever. If I'm at home with my biological parents or whatnot, and I come out to them, that's one thing. But now you're at the next step after, like, you're not living with your parents or whatnot, you're coming out there, there's everyone around you, not knowing how the other kids in the placement are going to accept you, not knowing if the person over the program is going to accept you. So it's like, where do I go from here? Because if I live, you think in your mind, if I'm being put out of this place, or if I don't want to live here, where is there else to go? Because this is like the last step for me at this point.
Culturally competent foster care is being open and honest agency, willing to work with any population. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a master of all of the populations. You don't need to know every little thing about different populations, but you need to be willing to learn about them and ask open questions and not being judgmental.
One of the challenges in foster care would be gender pronouns, which I feel are extremely important. The preferred name, which is also very important, and just feeling that level of self-respect by using it too, but it doesn't always happen that way, which makes you kind of feel disrespected, or you continue to think, well, will this person ever get the hang of it, or will they actually know I don't want to identify as who I used to be anymore?
We're not trying to change anyone's views, but we do need to be professional. We need to be open and say to these youth that have been so hurt by people that they love and people that they trust. And so we can't be just another person that they come to that is going to hurt them again.
You know, I like that video because it emphasizes the need that these children have and the youth, and also, you know, brings self-awareness and understanding within ourselves. Do we know enough? How can I help them? Do I feel comfortable? Why don't I feel comfortable if I was to have a child that identifies LGBTQ? What do I need to work through, right? And also we have abilities, people that are body able or not, and considering also any abilities internally that might be going on and disabilities that we might not see but people are struggling with. So this is also something to be sensitive about and aware when it comes to body able people or people that have disabilities, and you know, seeing how are you open and receptive to children in your home that struggle, and how can you educate yourself more or find the support that you need to be able to meet their needs and help them. And then any other things that you can think of, you know, that it can be considered part of culture or identity.
We actually have a line that we do at our house. We practice this thing. What is it?
I'm Ariel Sky Williams. I'm 8 years old. I'm unarmed and I have nothing that will hurt you.
It's just kind of a thing we practice at our house. There are great police officers out there. There's also some police officers who are not so good.
And my fear is that you run across one of those bad ones.
For some reason, people of color have always been a target by the police.
Before they became a policeman, they were a person. And that person took all their ideas and all their thoughts and all their prejudice into their job.
Why would a police officer assume that you did something bad? Maybe because of my skin color.
I remember being put in handcuffs for something that had nothing to do with me. I was literally walking in the mall. Cops slammed me on the ground, busted my lip, chipped my tooth. That actually made me really mad.
How about the time they pulled us over with me in the car and arrested me and left all of you guys sitting in the car and nobody knew how to drive on the side of the road because the bumper on the car was kind of hanging off. You know, we live in Puyallup. There's people that don't even have a bumper on their car.
My rear brake light wasn't working, and I got to my destination and they were working.
I was about your age, actually. They grabbed me.
Why?
I didn't know at the time. They just grabbed me. They threw me onto the police car.
I got tased that time. That time they tased me because they said I wasn't complying.
Ariel, are you okay?
What's wrong, baby? I'm okay. I'm alive, all right? Every day I get to see you. I get to do this, right? All right, come on. I'll finish this, all right? You good? Hey, you make me cry.
You have to be careful when you're out there in this world because this world's not going to always be honest or fair to you. I know, Sean, you got a little bit lighter than the rest of them, so it's a possibility you won't get stopped.
Sound like you just pulled him over.
Okay. If you're driving, cop pulls you over.
Police gets out the car, comes to the window. What would you do?
License and registration, please, ma'am.
Why do you think I pulled you over?
I don't know, tell me.
When a police officer says something you don't, you're black. You can't be looking at them saying, oh, I don't know, why don't you tell me? Well, that right there is giving them the license to pull you out of your car and physically harm you because it will be done.
Don't get upset, don't get sassy. Why did you pull me over? You don't have, I know how, just follow instructions and stay calm.
Okay. Do you think just being a police officer and pulling you over, regardless of if you feel you've done something or not, they should get your respect?
That's a tricky question.
The answer is yes.
Yes. If you gotta go to your wallet to get your ID, say, can I go reach in my back pocket to get my ID out? You could do what I do and I show them my hand. So when they're walking up, they see I don't have anything in my hand.
I'm Ariel Sky Williams, and I have nothing that will harm you or hurt you.
And what's the next place you put your hands when you're driving or on the steering wheel with your hands out?
If at all possible, turn your phone on.
And call someone and put it on speaker.
But whatever you're doing, I want you to say what you're doing before you do it.
You don't write any statements.
Well, you have to write a statement.
You don't have to write anything. You're a minor. I'm responsible for you. No one can tell you anything else.
If he tells you to be quiet, be quiet. Do everything that you can to get back to me.
I see it weighing on you, and I don't want it to weigh on you.
I'm just worried about Donovan. I'm worried about him now.
Who are you guys talking about?
My nephew and her cousin.
I don't want him to be shot. I don't want him to go to jail.
You guys, if you could say anything to police, what would you say?
Learn about people, learn about their problems.
Take some diversity training. I mean, it should be like at this point, like a monthly requirement.
You know, there's really nothing at this point that they could do that would make me feel any safer with them without them just point blank clearing them all out and starting all over from scratch.
So don't always assume that all of them are bad.
But all you see on the news and in newspapers, and it keeps happening. It's just in a different way. It's like how people are like, you should forgive so-and-so, but they keep doing it to me. I forgave them, but they keep doing it to me. It gets harder and harder to forgive them.
Wow. That was very powerful, and I know it chokes me up all the time when I see this. I had to walk away a little bit because I literally just start crying. But it's a very deep video, and it's something that we need to look at, given where we are as a country, as a culture, as a community, as a society. And this is the way that we learn. I had no idea that this is like African-American parents having to train their kids and have this conversation. I've never had that conversation with my kids. I've never felt the need, but to see what other cultures have to do to keep themselves safe and their kids was very eye-opening for me. So let's keep it moving. We're almost done here. All right. So where are you on the journey of cultural competency? How are you moving forward? Okay. Where are you on the continuum? So there's denial, defense, minimization, acceptance, adaptation, integration. Okay. Denial is pretty much where your world is the only one, it's all that exists. You deny and are disinterested in diversity. You might tell yourself, foster children in my care just need to adapt to my rules and my beliefs, and they'll be fine. If they don't, then they won't get better, and it's their fault. Okay, so you're denying, you're minimizing, right? Defense is your experience your world as better than yours, and use stereotyping to defend your views. You may not even be aware of your own stereotypes or the subtle messages that make foster children feel uncomfortable. Comments such as, racial slurs or negative comments about the children, biological parents, culture, or religion can be very detrimental if you do it in front of the children. Minimization is where there's a difference and that exists, but you minimize them, believing that human similarities outweigh the differences. You might tell yourself all children are the same, and sooner or later the children will come to accept our belief system, and theirs doesn't matter. And then acceptance is you recognize and value cultural differences and are curious about them and your cultural beliefs as well, and other belief systems. And then you begin to educate yourself about the differences in culture by reading, watching a video, asking a friend of that ethnicity, being curious, and attending workshops, and so on. Then adaptation, you value cultural differences. You begin to change your behaviors to communicate more effectively with children of different backgrounds. Now you are willing to make adaptations in foster care, and you are also non-defensive when given suggestions on how to strengthen your foster child's cultural identity. and you check in with the children about concerns at home. And then integration is you value a variety of cultures and more easily in and out of varying communication styles. You're also open to discussing different ways to include cultural relevance experiences for the child in your care, and you're not threatened by the possibility that the child may want to learn a culture or belief system that is different from your own, and you allow the child to discover his or her own true culture. You have also learned to match the communication style of your foster child. All right, so for today's takeaway, be open-minded to differences, continue to self-evaluate your own actions and approaches, and be curious, ask questions. You can preface questions like, I don't know how to ask this, but you know what? I'm really curious to learn more of. Allow the child to be the expert in their culture. And don't be afraid to not know everything. That is okay. That's why we're here for you. And again, just like we mentioned, allow the child to be the expert. Ask them. It's okay to not know everything. And continue to do the inner work. What are your own biases? Become curious. I challenge you to go and try to learn about the food, about the diverse cultures that children come in with. Go try new foods. Go, learn a new language if you want. Be creative. There's so many different ways that you can move up the continuum of cultural competency. You have to be open and willing. And I want to urge you to continue on this path with compassion towards yourself and the children in your care. Thank you so much. And that actually concludes our cultural competency training. Thank you for being here. And we really value the work that you do, and we appreciate you.